All right, Kevin, let's get going.
Sounds great. Hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. My name is Kevin Bowie, and I'm the Manager of Sport Development with Via Sport. And I'll be moderating today's Return to Sport webinar. So thank you for joining us. It's great to have so many people from the Columbia Basin joining us today. And I'd like to acknowledge that we're doing this work on the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples of general areas. Just a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning here. There's a Q&A box just at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that. You can submit any questions to our panelists. We'll see that on our end, and we will try and flag those and get to them for you. Thanks a lot for those who pre-submitted questions. That makes our job a lot easier, and we'll be able to work through a bunch of the questions that you have for us today. So just so you know that this will be recorded and will be redistributed on our YouTube channel and available on request if you should need it. And then I'll just start by throwing it over to Jared, who can sort of give us a brief overview of what's going to go on today, and then we'll go to our other panelists.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jared Cope, and here with Via Sport, Director of Provincial Activation, and been supporting leading the Return to Sport for on behalf of the province. Via Sport has been in a role, and myself and a colleague, Heather Beattie, have been working really closely with government and all the provincial sport organizations, and as well as communities to develop this process. So hope that we can shed some light on that process and answer your questions today. And also would like to turn it over to our other panelists. So James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm James Brotherhood. I'm the sport development specialist in the Columbia Basin, working closely with Via Sport. I've been in the role for about a year. Well, not quite, but coming up to. And yeah, I've got an extensive background in sport. I've been at the elite level, at the development level, a coach, an athlete, a board member, and I'm excited to be on this call and continue to support all of the local sport orgs through this process.
Awesome, thank you. And Tricia, I want to hand it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tricia Davison. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation with the City of Trail, and I'm also the President of the BC Recreation and Parks Association. So Via Sport and the recreation sectors have been working tirelessly in the background trying to get recreation and sport back off the ground and recovered. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tricia. And so really this session is, we held a webinar about a month ago now. It was about the Return to Sport process and for the province. And we had over 1,000 people register for that webinar, and wanting to learn more about the Return to Sport process. Is changing quickly and evolving all the time, and something that we want to continue to obviously push forward, but get the information into the right hands. And the right hands are people on this call. You're the ones that champion sport in your community and are really the heart behind it. So we want to continue to hear from you, us to be able to provide you information, but also hear what challenges that you're facing. So that's what we hope that today will be. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the process that we are in for Return to Sport, and then from there, with pre-submitted questions, Kevin will take us through that. But please, with the question and answer box at the bottom, please continue to write in your questions, and we'll be able to get to them today as well. So with that being said, I'm gonna start by discussing a little bit about the process today. We have it would have been a few months ago now, where the province of BC had tasked Via Sport to develop the Return to Sport guidelines. Those sector-wide Return to Sport guidelines were released in early June. And once those were released, the provincial sport organizations were able to develop or finalize their sport-specific guidelines. Those sport-specific guidelines by the provincial sport organizations were approved by the board of directors. Some are still in the process. So we have probably around 40 to 42, I think, sports that have approved sport-specific plans. And once that has been approved by the provincial sport organization board of directors, the local clubs can then adapt and adopt that plan to develop their return to sport plan locally. That return to sport plan can act as a COVID-19 safety plan. Every business organization across BC needs to have that COVID-19 safety plan. So your organizations, it will adopt that sport specific plan from your provincial sport organization, and then get board approval at a local level. That then is when you can start returning to sport. But what sport looks like is not what it looked like pre-COVID isn't what it looks like today. As part of the process, we have built this sport activity chart that helps guide the sports in what is and isn't okay right in the current state. One of the big questions that came out of last week that I'm sure many of you have, and that some have submitted, were asking about now that the province of BC is in phase 3, what does that mean for sport? Does that mean we're in progressively loosened with this chart that's in front of you that we've shared? The answer is no. We are not in progressively loosened. We are still in transition measures. The restart plan for BC to go to phase 3 really was an opening of other sectors, but still have the same restrictions as those sectors that open in phase 2, which was sport and recreation. So it was just more doors opening to different sectors, but the same restrictions apply. So we haven't moved to progressively loosen as it stands currently. So we are still in transition measures as a sports sector. I do want to add that we are working really closely with sport. Sport, obviously we're sport. But we're really working really closely with government to be able to identify where and answer some questions, to be able to start building in and loosening some of the restrictions, and understand when we can then go to progressively loosen. So we are working on that right now. And some of those answers, or some of those questions that we're trying to get answered, are around what does contact mean for the next phase, or how do we move slowly down this path? What does travel mean for sports? In phase 3, we are now allowed to travel, but for me to go visit my grandma is a lot different than me traveling with a group of 20 as a team from community to community to community. So there are differences in how we frame travel, and that we need to work with the public health office, and we aren't health experts in our jobs. So we need to get those answers and then sportify them. So we're working right now to get those answered, so that we can then build that into our next set of guidelines, our guidelines 2.0. It's not going to be a whole new comprehensive document, but it'll be updated so that the sports can then build in how they can do it for their sport with the new modifications that will then you'll be able to do within your context. So that's a bit of the update of the process, as well as the phase that we're in right now. And Kevin, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Jared. That's a great overview. So I guess we've heard from some sport groups and that getting approval by health authorities in return to sport is a part of the approval process. Is that true?
Yes, the health authorities obviously have a huge role to play, or the public health office has a huge role to play in all of the return for all sectors. We all need to follow the public health order that's set. Saying that, the local health authorities, so Interior Health or Northern Health, Fraser Health, they can support the the return for an operation for a facility and making sure that people are following the public health order, but they should not be approving sport-specific activities. So, for example, for hockey, they shouldn't be approving on-ice activities. It should be those sport organizations, whether you are a member of BC Hockey or not, going to their guidelines and reviewing their guidelines to use those as what activities should and shouldn't be. So we work really closely with health. They really set and inform us on things that we aren't experts in, but they aren't approving the actual sport activities of what should and shouldn't be. They're supporting us at a provincial level that we then develop, and then the sports to then put into their practice.
Great. Another question that's come up are approvals required for return to sport plans, and then who does moderate them if health authorities don't?
Yeah, so we've set guidelines, and there's a few different ways that we can look at the approval process. Everyone needs to have a COVID-19 safety plan. That is legislated, and you need to follow the COVID-19 safety plan, and there are measures for people to check in to make sure that is happening. That is one measure, as well as the ministerial order for COVID-19 insurance coverage and liability coverage. That, as part of that ministerial order, it is written right in that every sport needs to be following the provincial sport organization return to sport guidelines and via sport return to sport guidelines. So you are not covered if you are not following those guidelines. That is another measure. And Tricia will be able to speak to this as well, but most municipalities are asking for the plan. They might not be approving, but they're still asking for a plan that aligns with the provincial body, whether it be our sector guidelines or a sport specific guideline. Now, if they might not be having people on the field checking and have a measuring tape out to see space in between, but and I'm not saying that we should be social shaming people either, but people are submitting complaints and municipalities across the province are dealing with it in different ways. But that is another measure that's in place as well. And the last thing I'd say is, in general, it really should be your club or an organization that you represent. It is on your board of directors to be able to ensure the safety of your members and your community. So, making sure that the right training and education is in place so that all participants are safe is really important, and should be, some of that onus is on you as well. Tricia, is there anything else you would like to add to that?
Thanks, Jared. I think the only thing I would add is I think I can speak for municipalities in the Columbia Basin, if not the province, that would suggest that I think we all have a shared goal of wanting to keep sport going in the right direction, which is forward and not backwards. And I think the concern will always be is if there's not a level of social responsibility to do the things that we all know are the right things to do, and or if you don't know, to seek clarity before you do them. The risk, of course, becomes that either we go backwards as a whole society and we end up having to lose these privileges that we're really trying hard to regain, and or municipalities, if there's a serious problem going on, would be forced to actually shut down that particular service. So nobody wants to go there. We certainly don't have resources, I can say, for every municipality to be running around like the COVID police, nor do we want to. And we believe in humanity much more than that, and trust that everyone will do the right thing. But Jared is correct. We field comments, concerns, questions, complaints weekly, if not daily. You'd be quite surprised And I guess to not forget, if it is a surprise to you, to recognize the degree of sensitivity that does exist within a community. You've got the people that are the high level, more interested in being progressive and almost like risk taking kind of in this environment, versus those that play the highly conservative card and are very concerned about things moving too quickly. So maybe I'll leave it at that.
That's great.
Oh, that's great. Somebody did write in about best practices related to sort of, if I'm a parent in a community, how do I relay questions or concerns in an appropriate manner to either local rec centers, government, or to Via Sport?
I can talk about from a Via Sport lens and government. We want to hear what your challenges are. We have an email, info@viasport.ca, that you can send those concerns into. I get them and I read them. They are they inform our conversations with government in making decisions. They are really important, and this is a two-way street. So part of my job is understanding what happens in communities, and the only way that I do that is I rely on individuals like you to do that and to share. I'm going to actually pass it and know that those do get to government, and we do share those, and that helps us inform our decisions and what process we need to go in. I will add that we're never going to move as fast as you'd like us to move. That's just part of it. I've never seen government move this fast in my life, but we're still a lot of hoops to get through to make some of these decisions. So it is going to be a slower process than you'd want it to be. And James, I'm going to actually throw it over to you to talk a little bit about how you can field some of those questions and the role that you could play.
Yeah, certainly. If you have questions, you're probably not the only one with those questions, and that's a role that I can play, because I have a weekly call with Jared, if not more often than that, and access to all of the provincial sport organizations and the vast network. So, there's multiple ways that I can field those questions on behalf of the community. So you can reach me anytime at jamesb@viasport.ca. The other avenue would be on the return to sport activity on basinplays.org. So that is a fantastic communication tool built by Basin Plays and Columbia Basin Trust for you guys, for the sport community, and can act as that interactive Q&A place where you can come ask those questions. I can take them up or around to get answers and put them all on that page, and that way everyone is seeing the questions that are asked and the answers and are regularly updated. So if you haven't gone on basinplays.org, I would highly recommend that you do, and we start to build that sort of community where we can support one another, and I can support you through getting those questions answered.
And Tricia, is there anything that you'd add for the comments or concerns to municipality?
No, I think what I would just encourage people to do is I don't believe there's a recreation a group of recreation people in any community that are not working to some degree. So obviously various services are all over the map as to what's available and what isn't. But I would encourage you to reach out to your local recreation department. There's a tremendous amount of resource that's out there that we share with Via Sport and many other organizations that may be of help and or that we could help point you in the right direction if you had concerns or questions about a whole host of different things.
That's great. I think people out there are looking for educational tools on how to build their return to sport plan and look at the different safety mechanisms that might be in place for smaller sport organizations. So how do LSOs frame their return to sport plan while waiting for PSOs to deliver a sport plan to them?
They need to they need to wait until the provincial sport organization has an approved plan. So we need to, yeah, once the PSO has, sorry, once the PSO has an approved plan, they can then go forward. But until they have an approved plan, they should not be. If you are not affiliated with, if you're not affiliated with the PSO, you'll still need to be developing a safety plan. That safety plan should be connected to the sport, and even if you aren't a member of that PSO.
Good. So what counts as a 50-person maximum? How do we frame 50 people in terms of coaches, participants, or observers around parent support, different areas like that?
Yeah, for sure. And the 50-person gathering, I wish when you hear 50 people, it makes a lot of sense, but it actually is quite complicated. It is a maximum of 50 people in one gathering. So but for example, if you are in a baseball complex with 4 different diamonds, it could be 50 people per diamond, as long as there's enough physical distancing between at all times. So the main rule in all of this is your ability to physically distance. If there is the right procedures in place for entry and exits with enough space, then you can add more people. Same if you are in a larger field and there could be more than 50 people that could easily physically distance even in a sport context. If there's a clear divider between it, but with the entrance and exit clearly marked, wayfinding, then you can have more than 50 people in that space. But it has to be that the gathering of 50 people is limited to that. And I'd also add that when you're developing these plans, I would really start on the conservative side and build your way up, instead of being in a spot where you might be a little bit over your head, and there might be too many people in one spot.
Okay, so just a follow up around LSOs, when they are approving their plans that are delivered down through the PSO and then creating them locally, is it their board that approves that local plan, or is the PSO's plan stand as approved?
No, so the local club should be approving a plan, and you're gonna most likely have to adapt the provincial sport organization plan to fit in your local context by building in some nuances and personal touches of what you're going through, and connections into maybe it's your municipality or facility, whatever that is, that will need to be adapted into it, and then adapted and then adopted by the local club.
So in relation to competition and returning to competition, what is the current state of affairs as it relates to gameplay given regions with low numbers of COVID-19, especially given that we're at phase 3 in the reopening process for the province?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is one that was submitted to us. So, thank you for submitted to us ahead of time. So thank you for that. With competition, we aren't there yet. We need answers from government to be able to then help set the direction of what is and isn't possible. So right now we are still in transition measures. So we aren't at a spot where we can start having competitions. Saying that, there is some circumstances that do make sense where you can start building competition. For example, it would be a tennis club and it would be inter club play. That inter club play, you're already physically distanced. You're not sharing equipment. you would already be within that club. That makes sense where you can have competition. Archery, that makes sense. But when you're pulling a large group of people together and or the sport isn't conducive to that type of to physically distance, or there's a lot of equipment share, then we're just not there yet. Oh, and other part of that was regional differences. The short answer of that is we're moving as a province, and so there are no differences by region. I understand the frustration of that because there are parts of the province that obviously has higher numbers than others. Even our numbers overall are small, but it is about continuing on this path and making sure that we're continuing to work together and be safe. So this might change down the road, but I haven't seen any I haven't seen any type of conversation that we might go to a regional model, but that might change, but I haven't seen any of those conversations in that dialogue.
That's great. So in relation to bordering areas of BC, how do we address interprovincial competition, especially with athletes more than 50 or under 50, if we can manage social distancing? Do outdoor events apply differently than indoor events?
So, well, the inter provincial travel, that's not happening yet. You shouldn't be traveling out of province for sport. We had a meeting with Alberta last week, and that conversation was raised. We on both ends we asked Alberta to flag from their side what their rules are. For the most part, it is mostly BC going to Alberta to be part of, and some are even part of those provincial sport organizations in Alberta. So we're looking for clarity on that. We don't have it yet, but we will hopefully have it soon. And Kevin, what was the second part of that?
Just whether indoor or outdoor sport has a greater effect on the 50-person number, as well as the interprovincial nature of the travel.
Yeah, so with the 50 people there, obviously we want to see outdoor more than indoor. But saying that, it does, there's 50 gatherings no matter what. That is the rule, and it comes down to your ability to physically distance. So the number of people gathering should be around the ability to physically distance.
Great. So in relation to parents and support of their athlete returning to play, there is a question that was submitted related to parents supporting their athletes in a competitive environment, given that they could be socially distanced in the bleachers or around the pitch.
I can start, and then Trish, I'm going to hand it over to you on this one because you'll have a better idea of how you're doing it with your facilities. Every municipality and facility operator that I've been in contact with, which is quite a few over the past couple of months, everyone's doing it slightly different. But again, it's coming back to that same principle for the most part of starting really slow and then moving forward that way. So, I've seen that bleachers are being spread out, that it's you can't sit here, you can sit here, can't sit here, and having other exits, entrances, or one-way entrances exit out the other side for a very clear flow through. So there is an ability to be in bleachers and stands. It's easier outside than inside, but some of those facility operators are figuring that out. Yeah, Tricia, I'll hand it over to you to talk about what you're doing.
Sure, and I think it's different. It's vastly different for indoor versus outdoor facilities from the complexity of it, and also potentially the availability of where the viewing or spectator area may be in relation to how venues are actually set up. So I was just writing one plan for our arena, and we think we have figured out a way where we could designate a small area, so long as we can cordon off the rest of the upper concourse and the rest of the bleachers, to create kind of this little zone that would allow for, especially, there's a time where young children are playing. Obviously, parents are not going to be comfortable leaving their children in a building like that on their own. So we naturally have to try to figure that out. What it does start to play into is the complexity of the flow of the building, because in many cases, the occupancy levels will be driven by the choke points of the facility. So depending on how facilities are set up could dramatically change the occupancy load. So I think wherever possible, we'd be saying limit your spectators to encourage maybe potentially more people to be able to play the actual activity where reasonable. If that's not reasonable, I think there's certainly opportunities outdoors, assuming, I don't know, whether it's people bring their own lawn chairs and sit along a soccer field, or whether there's a designated set of bleachers, and the safety plan that the sport group puts together says we're going to have people sit on every third row, whatever that may be. I think municipalities are open to, and may not naturally think of some of the creative means that sport groups might. So I would encourage you to bring them forward. Indoor facilities are a whole other animal. I think of even our pool environment. There's a very, very small, and we're a big facility, and it's a very small sort of viewing area. So that will dramatically impact the number of people that'll ever be able to be there, which could impact the number of people we can actually have in the building as well.
So basically, it's complicated.
It's all complicated.
Yeah.
It is complicated. So when does BC Hockey anticipate having their return to sport plan available?
Yeah, thanks for submitting the question, Heather. To answer shortly, they just released last week their template to follow for all their member organizations to develop their return to sport plan. So you can find that document on their website. And the other piece that I'll add is we've been in close contact with BC Hockey throughout this process. Hockey Canada is developing their return to sport activities. So it's going to be it's Hockey Canada. They're going to do a pretty comprehensive job. They're developing a guide of activities that can be done through COVID. So something that you can look forward to, and I think the date for release in that is July 8th to 12th, I think is what I heard. So you can look for that then. And I'll add in that part of the conversation with hockey and overall is around contact. So that is something else that we're working through. Contact right now is how we define it is anyone coming in within the 2 meter space of someone. So any sport that has that as part of their activity should be modified so that there is physical distance of more than 2 meters. There is time where you might run by someone and you're in their bubble for a short period of time. Some of those things happen. It's all good, but for the most part, how we're defining contact is still around 2 meters, and that's what we're doing for the province. So it might seem a little weird how do we play sport that way? And that's why we have to modify it, because that's still the public health orders. We want to have people more than 2 meters apart from each other. That is a question that we are trying to get clarity on of what that looks like in next phases, and that will then change again the modifications of what we are able to do.
Great. That sort of leads into how do we manage equipment in all of these sports, given some is provided by rec centers and then others are provided by the individual as they attend. What is the best practice right now for managing equipment and keeping things sanitary and safe?
I'm not a cleaning expert, and I've had to answer a lot of questions about cleaning that I don't always know the answers to. But in general, what we're asking for is to increase your cleaning protocols. So if there's touch points, they should be cleaned. In shared equipment, you want to minimize the amount of touch points. So how is it that you can have it that a smaller group of people are sharing a piece of equipment, and how do you clean it in between? Those types of things are what need to be built in, and those overarching guidelines should be part of the sport specific in the sport specific documents, and they are in the VIA Sports document as well. Trish, is there anything else you want to add from a equipment piece that you're thinking about?
The only thing maybe would be that I think if you went to a recreation center right now, well, if any of them are open, you would notice that pretty much all equipment, furnishings, anything that could be shared or touched where reasonable has been removed. So when you do get to go back to, especially an indoor space, you should notice quite a considerable difference. I think of our pool environment right now, where if you envision about the only shared piece of equipment that will be available will be life jackets, virtually everything else will be removed and will be unavailable. There could be some pool specific learning toys for lessons, but they will be highly controlled by the actual instructional staff and then cleaned and put away for the next group following that activity. They won't be that kind of free-for-all of equipment that people might be accustomed to seeing.
Great. So in terms of the practice environment that somebody would expect to enter, and even competition environments, how would like phase 3 look from a contact perspective? And what is the implication of the provincial outlook on a reoccurrence of the virus in a phase 2?
Yeah, that is a question that we just got submitted. So really appreciate the question and asking. You know, when I say we aren't there yet, when are we going to be there? So I get it that it's not straightforward. There's two parts of this. We need answers from the public health office to be able to then move forward. We at VIA Sport don't have the health expertise to be able to decide what competition looks like. We need the health perspective first, and then we sportify it. So part of this is, yeah, potentially we are ready, and competition could be in place, but from an actual process perspective, we don't have the answers yet, and so because of that, we need to do this cautiously. That's why I say we aren't there yet. We just don't have the answers, and so I don't know when we will. We are pushing for them. That might then, if this continues to stay how we are, competition could be slowly introduced, you know, in the near future. As you've also pointed out, if we do go back, then you know we'll or have more cases in our communities, competition won't happen, and so it is a fluid thing that we don't really have all the answers for. It's really not a switch where we can just turn it on, turn it off. It's really going to be a slow process back.
Great. And how does that translate to adult sports and sort of unaffiliated leagues that are not necessarily under the guise of their PSO?
We've, you know, Trisha had mentioned BCRPA, and really they've developed a great set of guidelines for the recreation sector and return to activity. We've been working really closely with BCRPA and have developed a template for those unaffiliated sport groups. So you can find that unaffiliated checklist at viasport.ca in the resource section. And that template could be used to submit your plan to your municipality for the return to activity of your group, saying that we do want to see alignment, and if it's a slow pitch, we would want you to still be following one of the baseball or softball provincial sport organization plans and their guidelines. So we don't want to move. We don't want to move too quickly, and or have one group going too far ahead of others. So that's something that that needs to be considered. We did recognize that there was a need for these groups to be supported, and so we are working to equip the municipalities with this information as well, so they can support those groups as well. Kim, sorry, Trisha, is there anything else that you want to add? No, okay, cool. I was looking at a question from Kim on our question and answer. Thanks for submitting, Kim.
Okay. That sort of brings up Kim's question. What guidelines are soccer following? What's the approach to interplay and competition related to soccer? And where can they find information?
Again, soccer's worked really closely with us, and they are following VIA Sports guidelines and then have built them into a soccer context. So they right now it's about training and skill development. They aren't holding competitions. They aren't, they are continuing to physically distance and ensuring that that their clubs are doing that. So they have guidelines. You can find all the guidelines at viasport.ca, and yeah, the soccer ones are comprehensive, and you can find them there.
Yeah, related to certifications of sport, we've got a question. I'm curious about the certification process. When we return back to sport, i.e. soccer or swimming, how are we handling certification, i.e. refereeing, recreational, NL, and WSI, for example? What is the landscape of certification?
I have no idea. I'll add this to the question to the mix. We're just trying to keep our head above water right now, and haven't thought that far about some of these certifications. So we'll make sure to update that in our FAQ and look ahead. And honestly, Kevin's probably going to take lead on some of that. So yeah, we'll add it to the repertoire and try to get an answer for you.
For sure. I will add, just from my perspective, did a sports science and sport medicine webinar that's available on the VIA Sport YouTube page. And that may answer some of the questions related to movement through the phases as the province reopens. So that is a good reference point from an actual sports science, sport medicine question and answer. That's also available in an FAQ on our website. So are there different guidelines that private organizations have to follow in comparison to nonprofit sport?
Yeah, the short answer is that everyone needs to have a COVID-19 safety plan, and everyone needs to follow the public health order. So in every, if you're a private or part of a not-for-profit, you need to do that. Part of that is physical distance. You need to build that into your plan. Saying that, most of the amateur sports system that's connected to a provincial sport organization, if you are a not-for-profit, you're typically a little bit more conservative than some of the private groups that we're seeing, moving forward with their sport activities. We do want to see alignment. We want to see those private organizations align with the documents and the guidelines set from the provincial sport organizations, even if they're not a member. And yeah, so that I'll leave it there.
Sounds good. Yeah, just around the return to sport guidelines from a community perspective, how are we looking at contact tracing within the community in the Columbia Basin, and who is the best resource to go to in that region?
Who's the best resource to
look at for safety and protocols related to safe return to sport, and how would you manage the return to sport guideline?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would look at the sport specific plans. They most have some sort of contact tracing information or link to it. We highlighted in our document as well. So being pre-registered, understanding what group came at what day, having that list. A lot of the provincial sport organizations have suggested that the local clubs have a COVID ambassador or someone who really is setting that protocol, or working with the coaches or parents or whoever it may be, the managers, to have that built in to their just their process of bringing participants together. So there's a lot of different ways that can be done. But I would go, there's a lot of great information. I've never seen so many guidelines be built in a short amount of time. So the information's in those documents, and if it's not within that document, it'll have a link somewhere else. And via sport, our return sport guidelines will outline some of that as well.
Awesome. And just, I guess, wrapping up a little bit here, municipalities and your regional alliance partner, what is the best, what are they going to look for your sport when they're looking to return? And how is it best to engage them in that process?
Trish, you can take that one.
So I think, well, there's a couple of things. So to try not to, sorry, there's a wicked, is anybody else in Castlegar? There is a wicked storm that just hit around here. But if I look distracted, it's because I'm literally watching trees kind of look like they're going to blow over. So what will we be looking for? So I think, so I'll start with outdoor facilities. So Jared talked about it at the beginning, but we don't necessarily, and I can't speak to every municipality because everyone will be a little different. So you should really check with them to find out what they're going to need. But generally speaking, the concept of you needing to have a COVID-19 safety plan, a municipality may request to see it, in my world anyways, for one of two reasons. If there's a complaint about an activity, we may say, can we see your COVID-19 safety plan because, X, we've had a complaint about soccer on X field. So then we'd be looking to try to understand whether the COVID-19 safety plan was the issue or was the behavior of the actual sport an issue. And other than that, what we would really need is the board resolution that says that your board has seen, reviewed, and is agreeing that it adheres to your PSO. So in an outdoor environment, that would be kind of the most simplistic means. Where we may require to see them is going to be in indoor facilities, because the challenge will be that your sport COVID-19 safety plan will need to adhere to the facility one. And so obviously if hockey is developing, minor hockey is developing a COVID-19 safety plan for our arena that doesn't align with what the facility one is, obviously it just creates conflict and a problem. So what municipalities are running around doing right now is developing their site-specific plan so that we can give them to sport, so that you are then using those to develop your own safety plans. You'll go, oh, this is the designated entry and exit points. This is how they're handling spectators. This is the occupancy limits for various spaces. Because if, say, hockey decides, or are dressing rooms even available, or showers available, there's a whole host of things that the site-specific plans will address that then we will be making sure that your plan aligns with. And I think some activities are going to be more challenging than others, and it's going to be those ones where there's a lot of interface between the facility and the sport versus occupying, a given room to do an activity might be far more simplistic. So I don't know if I've answered that question, but they're quite different. And yeah, it's going to feel like potentially the rules may feel different for different activities, and unfortunately that will probably be the case.
Yeah, actually, just quickly to add on that, Tricia, I missed that part of when I talked about the process at the beginning. It is crucial, the relationship between sport and municipalities and facility operators in our plan. So we need to work closely together. We're working with the municipalities all the time to understand their process, as well as for them to shed some light on what they're going through to help with ours. So it is a crucial relationship, and one that you're going to navigate to, and really a marrying of the two processes. So it's important.
Great. Yeah, there's actually a question that came in related to that, revolving around softball and season being sort of lost without any ball playing. Is there any recommendation about waiting for approval for the plan before moving forward? so we can begin to work with a coach in an organized fashion.
So yeah, Derek, thanks for the question. And so if you're a softball association in a community that, and you know, your provincial sport organization has an approved plan, you can develop yours based off of those modifications and start doing those activities. What for example, softball, baseball, we're trying to project of when they could do inter-community leagues and play, and are still trying to kind of confirm some of those. So that's where it's fluid, and so the activities and training and skill development, if you can go ahead. It depends on if you think that work or with the evolving timelines is worth it, or if it's too much of a risk. You might want to wait as well. So that is up to really to your board and what you're wanting to do. And I'll just actually the one other question, Justin, I touched on contact, but in your question, just so everyone knows, is around clarify contact close proximity trainers and pairs during phase 3, specifically for judo grappling sports. We are working again to define contact and what that looks like. Again, we're in transition measures. In that chart that we had up at the beginning, we're in the second phase. Phase 3 for the province we're there, but for sport we're in transition measures, and we're working to solidify some of those definitions. Where, you know, I was just talking to Judo BC today, and trying to make it so that when we have those answers, they can then define it quite clearly for you and your clubs.
Great. Thanks so much for the questions, everybody. I just want to open it up to the floor as we near the end here, and just see if there's anything that Trish or James would like to add.
I guess I'll go. Yeah, just want to say thanks to everyone out there doing all this work. You know, I know it's tricky, and I know it's very difficult to look at even next winter and try to comprehend what your seasons might look like, and should you put the effort into organizing to do hosting or not, and, you know, will you have interprovincial travel or international travel to your region? You know, those answers will come, and I'm sorry that they're not available right now. The other thing that I just want to hammer home or send the message is that this unfortunately is a long, you know, it's gonna be a while before we have an effective treatment or a vaccine for coronavirus. So doing the work you're doing now and making this investment is really important, so that our communities and kids can come back to some semblance of sport and are continuing to develop for life post-COVID. But, you know, yeah, it's very likely that next spring we will be in these calls trying to figure out what those next steps look like.
I think for me, my parting thoughts would be, I have really valued wearing my BCRPA hat. I actually neglected to state that I'm also a VIA Sport board member. So sorry about that. So I've had the privilege of working on both sides of this fence in multiple different capacities. And of course, my profession is in recreation. And I have never been so proud of our collective sector in the work that's been done to date. Like Jared said, there has been more guidelines and more work, not just completed, but approved at some of the highest levels of the provincial government in ways that I've never witnessed ever. And it's been a real treat to be able to work so closely together. I know we all share the desire to see our buildings full and our parks full of people playing all these different sports and activities. And I also know we all desperately want to do it right, out of somewhat fear of it going backwards. And at least that if we do go slowly, if something does happen, in the future, then at least we can only fall back a little ways versus having to go back to square one. I'd hate to lose all of the great work that has been done. So I know we're calling on everyone's patience, and certainly your creative thoughts. That's another thing that's just fascinated me. I've been amazed at some of the work that has come out from people and how creative and out of the box thinking everyone has just grabbed onto and run with. And so just because there's people like myself who are a municipal leader and Jared sitting in Via Sport, that we don't necessarily want to pretend we always have all the answers either. We're trying to stay half a step ahead of everyone just to help move things forward in the right direction. But if you do have something that you think would be a really good idea, something you're not sure if it's been considered, I know all of us, our phones are ready to be called upon, and our emails are there for you to reach out to, because we desperately want to help move forward in the right way.
So you heard that. If you have any questions, go to Trisha, not me. No, I'm absolutely kidding. I couldn't have said it better, Trisha. And so for me, I want to say, James is there in the Columbia Basin. We do meet often. We text often. He's the first person that I bounce ideas off. He's the first person that tries to give me more idea of what's going on in the Kootenays. So lean on him, lean on me too. Absolutely, I'm here for those questions. I do want to call out the Basin Plays and the hub that's been developed that James talked about earlier as a platform for you to come together. And I see some of these questions coming in where you can share some of the plans and things that you're going through. Use those platforms. They're absolutely there and are really, really helpful from a municipality lens. Everyone's gonna, and I know Shelley, you just submitted a question about the alignment between those plans. Every municipality is going to be different in where they're at with their development of plans, and every sport is going to be a little bit different too. There's over 40 sports that have provincial sport organizations have their sports, but there's within sport and recreation, we have layers and layers of sports and municipalities that need to bring together these two systems. So it's not always going to be perfect, but we're asking to do as best as we can to put those plans together. I didn't answer your question fully, but I hope that's a start. The last one, you guys with these last minute questions coming in. No, it's good that you got them in. The Alberta one, I did say earlier that we did meet with Alberta last week. We're going to continue that dialogue with Alberta. Honestly, for the first couple of months, it was like head down and try to just get through the day and get as much information out as possible, guidelines built, working with the provincial sport organizations, hearing from the community of what's going on, working with municipalities, working with the government. So our heads a little bit above, trying to project a little bit longer, building our strategies, and part of that is working with Alberta. They do have their plan that has been released. They're working in phases. They have a cohort system that you can go check out. So we'll add that in our resources. Kevin, please remind me. We'll add that at viasport.ca in our resource page to have Alberta's plan for you to look at as well. And for travel, that is a question that we explicitly talked about and something that we'll bring up. We'll answer when we do. So we're working with Alberta on the travel question as well. So I know we're at 7 o'clock. The last thing I want to say, I've never in my career have felt like I've been holding back sport, and that's weird because my whole life has about been promoting and building sport. But we just need to get this right, and we get this right by going slow, by working together, and sometimes that's going to take time. So thank you for your support, and thank you for continuing to be those champions in your communities in doing this in a way that we're all learning together. And if you have any other questions, comments, please reach out. We're here for you.
Great.
Kevin, I'll hand it over to you to wrap.
Not a problem. I'd just like to echo Jared's comments. Taking it slow, working methodically, and getting back to sport are the priorities, and we'll do that together. So thanks very much for engaging with us, and look forward to working with you some more. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.